Ambassador Hannah stood alone in the center of the great chamber. Around her, rising in endless tiers like a mountain of faces, sat the representatives of 1,000 species. Some had scales, some had fur, some had no bodies at all, existing only as lights floating in special containers. All of them looked down at her with the same expression. It was the way someone might look at an insect that had crawled onto their dinner table. She had been speaking for 3 hours. Her throat was dry. Her legs ached from standing. But she kept her voice steady as she made her final plea. "We have followed every rule," she said. "We have stayed within our system. We have shared our technology. We have done everything the Council asked. 300 years we have waited. 300 years we have been patient. We ask only for what every species deserves: recognition, equality, a voice in this chamber." The silence that followed was worse than any insult. "High Arbiter." Korath rose from his seat at the top of the chamber. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like stone and eyes that held no warmth. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the vast space like thunder from a distant storm. "The human makes her request," he said. "Again, as her kind has done for 3 centuries. And again. We must explain what should be obvious to any thinking creature." He looked down at Hannah the way a teacher might look at a child who keeps failing the same simple test. "Humanity is young," he continued. "Humanity is violent. Your history is written in blood. War after war, weapon after weapon. You split the atom not to power your cities, but to destroy them. You are not ready for equality. You may never be ready." Hannah felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her face calm. Every species has violence in its past. We have learned from ours. Have you? Korath's thin lips twisted into something that might have been a smile. Your ships carry weapons. Your soldiers train for battle. Even now, your scientists work on projects you hide from us. Do not speak to us of peace while you prepare for war. We prepare to defend ourselves. Nothing more. And that, Korath said, is precisely the problem. You think defense? You think enemies? You see threats in every shadow. This is not the thinking of a mature species. This is the thinking of animals. Chamber erupted in sounds of agreement. Clicks and whistles and rumbles from 1,000 alien throats. Hannah stood in the middle of it all, feeling very small and very alone. Korath raised his hand and silence fell again. The Council has made its decision. Humanity will remain a provisional species. You will stay in your system. You will submit to inspection of all military development. And you will wait until we decide you are worthy of more. He turned away, dismissing her without another word. Hannah walked out of the chamber with her head held high. She did not let them see her cry. She saved that for the long journey home. She never arrived. 12 hours after leaving the station, her ship received an emergency transmission from Mars. The colony of New Busan was under attack. Not by pirates or criminals, but by ships of the collective itself. Warlord Brix had decided that humanity needed a lesson. The attack lasted 6 hours. 12 million people lived in New Busan. When the bombardment ended, none of them were left. The domes that had protected the city were shattered. The air had escaped into the thin Martian atmosphere. Families who had been eating dinner were frozen in their seats. Children who had been playing in parks would never play again. Brix called it a corrective action. Said humans had been building illegal weapons. He said he had proof. He never showed this proof to anyone. The real reason was simpler. Humanity had dared to ask for equality. They had dared to stand in front of the Council and speak as if they mattered. Brix wanted to remind them that they did not. Ambassador Hannah watched the news feeds in her small ship, alone in the dark between stars. She watched the images of destruction play over and over. She watched the bodies. She watched the ruins. And something inside her changed. She had spent her whole life believing in diplomacy. She had believed that if humans were patient enough, kind enough, peaceful enough, the galaxy would eventually accept them. Now she understood the truth. The galaxy would never accept them. The galaxy would only respect them when it had no other choice. On Earth, President Kyun-ho addressed the United Nations. Every screen on the planet showed his face. Every human being stopped to listen. He was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent his career trying to avoid conflict, trying to find compromise, trying to keep humanity safe through careful words and careful actions. But as he stood before the cameras, there was something new in his expression. Something hard and cold and absolutely certain. "They killed 12 million of our people," he said. 12 million souls who wanted nothing but to live in peace. They killed children. They killed families. They killed dreams. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was like iron. "We ask for peace." They answered with fire. "Now we will teach them what war truly means." Across the galaxy, the announcement was met with laughter. A provisional species declaring war on the collective? It was absurd. It was suicide. Humanity had no fleet capable of fighting even a small patrol group. They had no allies. They had no hope. High Arbiter Korath did not even bother to respond officially. He simply ordered a blockade around the human system and told his admirals to wait. "Let them starve," he said. "Let them remember their place." But in military academies across the collective, a few officers did not laugh. They had studied human history. They had read about the wars humans fought against each other. They had seen what happened when humans were pushed into corners. One young officer wrote a report warning his superiors that underestimating humanity would be a fatal mistake. The report was ignored. The officer was reassigned to a quiet post far from anywhere important. He would be proven right sooner than anyone expected. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. It had given humanity a reason to fight, and humanity, once awakened, would not stop until the stars themselves trembled. The blockade around the Sol system was massive. 200 warships formed a ring around human space, each one armed with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Fleet Master Drawl commanded from his flagship, a vessel so large it had its own weather systems inside. He was bored. 18 months had passed since the humans declared war. 18 months of nothing. No attacks. No escape attempts. No desperate pleas for mercy. Just silence. At first, Drawl had been alert. He had heard stories about human unpredictability. He had prepared his fleet for tricks and traps. But as the months passed and nothing happened, he began to relax. The humans had clearly accepted their fate. They were probably fighting among themselves now, as primitive species always did when faced with hopeless situations. He began to pull ships from the blockade. There were more important places they could be. Real threats to face. The humans were not going anywhere. On the Galactic Council station, Counselor Nelva watched the fleet reports with growing concern. She was Valanthia, a species known for their careful thinking and their long memories. Unlike most council members, she had actually studied humanity. She had read their literature, watched their films, listened to their music. She understood something her colleagues did not. Humans were never more dangerous than when they were quiet. She requested a meeting with High Arbiter Korath. He kept her waiting for 4 hours before seeing her. "You worry too much," he said when she shared her concerns. "The humans are broken. They know they cannot win. This silence is the silence of defeat." "With respect, Arbiter, I disagree," Nelva said. "I have studied their history. When humans are truly defeated, they are not silent. They cry out. They bargain. They beg. This silence is different. This is the silence of a predator waiting to strike." Korath laughed. It was not a kind sound. "You give them too much credit. They are animals with machines they barely understand. Even if they tried to fight, what could they do? Their technology is generations behind ours. Their fleet is tiny. They are trapped in their own system with no way out. And yet they declared war knowing all of this," Nelva said. "Does that not concern you? Either they are insane, or they know something we do not." Korath waved his hand, dismissing her words. "Let them have their secrets. It will not matter. When they finally try something, we will crush them. Until then, I have more important matters to attend to." Nelva left the meeting knowing she had failed. She could feel something terrible coming, like the pressure in the air before a great storm. But no one would listen. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, In a facility that did not appear on any map, Dr. Sora stood before a window looking into a massive chamber. Inside the chamber floated a ship unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was small compared to collective vessels, barely larger than a transport shuttle. But it contained technology that would change everything. Admiral Tae Woo stood beside her. He was a short man with a face that rarely smiled, but his eyes were sharp and missed nothing. He had been planning for this moment his entire career. "Is it ready?" he asked. Dr. Sora nodded. "Project Prometheus is complete. We have 47 ships equipped with the new drive systems. Each one can fold space instantly, appearing anywhere in the galaxy without warning. The collective sensors cannot track the process. To them, we will simply appear from nothing. Side effects? The drives generate enormous heat. We can only make a few jumps before we need to cool down. And the process is uncomfortable for the crew, but it works." Taewoo studied the ship. It looked fragile compared to the massive warships of the collective. But he had learned long ago that size meant nothing. Speed, surprise, and the will to fight. "Those were what won wars? The crews are volunteers?" he asked. "Every single one. We had to turn people away. Everyone wants to fight." Taewoo allowed himself a small smile. This was what the collective did not understand about humans. They saw human history and thought it showed a violent species that would tear itself apart. They did not see what lay beneath that violence. When humans faced an outside threat, they forgot their differences. They became one people, one force, united by something stronger than any government or ideology. They became a family, and family protected its own. Captain Yuna walked into the observation room. She was young for her rank, barely 30 years old, but she had earned her position through skill and courage. She would command the flagship, the Iron Will. "Admiral," she said, "the fleet is ready. All crews are at their stations. We are waiting for your order." Taewoo looked at her. "You understand what we are about to do? There is no going back from this. We are 47 ships against an empire that spans the galaxy. The odds are not in our favor." Yuna met his gaze without flinching. "My grandmother died on Mars," she said. "So did my niece. She was 6 years old. She wanted to be a pilot when she grew up." Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched into fists. "I am not doing this because I think we will win. I am doing this because some things are worth dying for. And making them pay for what they did is one of those things." Taewoo nodded slowly. Every member of his fleet had a similar story. The attack on New Busan had given them something beyond courage. It had given them purpose. "And let us begin," he said. In the shipyard stations throughout Earth's orbit, engines came to life. Crews ran final checks on weapons and shields. Pilots strapped themselves into seats and whispered prayers to gods. Their species had worshipped since before they left their caves. Lieutenant Yeho, the tactical officer aboard the Iron Will, looked at his screens one final time. He had mapped every collective military base, every shipyard, every communication relay, within range of their first strike. He knew exactly where to hit to cause the most damage. "All targets confirmed," he reported. 17 simultaneous strikes across 12 systems. They will not know what hit them. Captain Yuna opened a channel to all ships. Her voice reached every crew member in the fleet. "Today we stop hiding," she said. "Today we stop being afraid. Today we show the galaxy what humanity is capable of when we have nothing left to lose." They thought they broke us. They were wrong. They only woke us up. She looked at the stars through her viewport. Somewhere out there, enemies were laughing at the very idea of human resistance. They would not be laughing for long. "All ships," she said. "Activate Prometheus drives. Let's go to war." The fleet vanished in a ripple of folded space, leaving behind an empty shipyard and a silence that would soon spread across the stars. The galaxy's nightmare had begun. The first strike hit the collective shipyard at Varan Prime at exactly midnight, local time. The workers on the night shift were drinking bitter coffee and complaining about their supervisors. When the sky split open and death came pouring, 3 human ships appeared inside the station's defensive perimeter. They should not have been there. It was impossible. The nearest human system was 18 days away at maximum speed. Yet there they were, weapons already firing before the alarms even started. The shipyard held 40 vessels in various stages of construction. Within 10 minutes, all 40 were burning. The human ships moved like ghosts, impossible to track, impossible to hit. They struck with terrible precision, destroying weapons, engines, and command centers while leaving crew quarters intact when possible. Then they vanished, folding away into nothing, leaving behind only fire and confusion. Across the galaxy, 16 other attacks happened at the exact same moment. Fleetmaster Drawl received the reports on his flagship. Still holding position around the human system, he read them once. Then he read them again. Then he threw his datapad across the bridge hard enough to crack the wall. Possible, he said. This is impossible. They cannot be in 17 places at once. They cannot travel that fast. This must be a trick. False reports. Sabotage. His communications officer looked up with fear in his eyes. Sir, I have confirmed the reports with direct sensor data. The attacks are real. We have lost over 40 ships in the first hour. More reports are coming in. Drawl stared at his tactical display. Red markers were appearing across the map like drops of blood spreading through water. Human ships were hitting targets he had considered completely safe, targets that were supposed to be months away from any possible human attack. How? He whispered. How are they doing this? No one had an answer. On the bridge of the Iron Will, Captain Yuna allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Their first strike had worked perfectly. The collective was in chaos, their communications flooded with panicked reports, their commanders unable to understand what was happening. Damage report, she said. Lieutenant Yeho checked his screens. All 17 targets hit successfully. Estimated enemy losses, 42 capital ships destroyed. 12 orbital stations heavily damaged, and approximately 30,000 enemy personnel killed. Our losses? 0. 0 losses. They had struck at the heart of the most powerful military force in the galaxy and escaped without a scratch. The Prometheus drives had worked exactly as Dr. Sora promised. The collective could not track them, could not follow them, could not even understand how they moved. Do not get overconfident, Yuna warned her crew. This was just the beginning. They will adapt. They will learn. We need to hit them again before they recover. But what she did not know was how badly the collective would adapt, how many of her people would die before the war was over. The next weeks were a nightmare for the collective. Human ships appeared without warning, struck with devastating force, and vanished before any response could be organized. They targeted military installations, fuel depots, and communication relays. They avoided civilian targets when possible, but they showed no mercy to anything that could be used against them. The psychological effect was even worse than the physical damage. Collective soldiers began seeing human ships everywhere. Sensors glitched, and entire bases went on alert, convinced they were under attack when nothing was there. Fear spread faster than any weapon. Admiral Tae-woo coordinated the campaign from a mobile command center that never stayed in one place for more than a few hours. He studied every battle report, learned from every mistake, and constantly refined his tactics. He was fighting a war unlike any that had been fought before, and he was winning, but he knew it could not last forever. They are pulling ships back from the blockade, he told his officers during a strategy meeting. They are consolidating their forces. Soon they will have enough firepower in key locations to make our raids too costly. Captain Yuna frowned. Then we need to hit them harder. Force them to spread out again. No. Tae-woo shook his head. We need to change our approach. The raids have done their job. We have shown them we are not helpless. Now we need to show them something else. We need to show them we can hold territory. The plan he outlined was risky. Instead of hit-and-run attacks, human forces would capture and hold strategic systems. They would force the collective to come to them, to fight on ground of human choosing. We will lose ships, Tae-woo admitted. We will lose people. But we will gain something more important. We will gain respect. And respect is what wins wars. The first territory they took was the Outer Reach, a cluster of 3 systems that controlled a major trade route. The collective garrison was small, complacent after years of peace. They never expected an attack so far from human space. Sergeant Minho led the ground assault on the main colony world. His soldiers dropped from orbit in armored pods, hitting the ground running. The fighting was brutal and close, exactly the kind of warfare humans had practiced for thousands of years. The collective soldiers were larger and stronger than humans. Their weapons were more advanced. But they had never faced an enemy like this. Human soldiers fought with a ferocity that defied logic. They used every trick, every dirty tactic, every desperate measure. They turned the collective's own weapons against them. They set traps that no military manual could have predicted. Within 2 days, the planet was under human control. High Arbiter Korath received the news in his private chambers. He sat in silence for a long time, staring at the report. Then he summoned his military council. "Enough games," he said. "Enough half measures. Assemble the largest fleet in our history. Every available ship, every allied species. We will go to the human system and end this, once and for all." The order went out across the galaxy. Within weeks, ships were gathering at staging points, forming an armada that stretched across the stars. 10,000 vessels, crewed by beings from 100 different worlds, all united by a single purpose: destruction of humanity. They called it the final solution. When the Human Intelligence Network reported the size of the approaching fleet, many officers urged retreat. They had won important victories, but they could not fight 10,000 ships. It was suicide. Admiral Tewu listened to their concerns. Then he stood and addressed his commanders. "We knew this day would come," he said. "We knew they would eventually bring everything they had against us. We have prepared for this. We have planned for this. And we will face it not with fear, but with the same determination that has brought us this far." Lee looked at each face in the room. These were his officers, his friends, his family. Many of them would not survive what was coming. He owed them the truth. "I will not lie to you. The odds are not in our favor, but odds are just numbers. And numbers do not account for the human heart. They do not account for the will to survive. They do not account for what happens when you push a human being to the very edge of destruction." He smiled, and for the first time, there was warmth in his expression. "Let them come. Let them bring their thousands of ships. We will show them that some fires cannot be put out. We will show them that humanity does not kneel." The fleet prepared for the greatest battle in human history. And across the gulf of space, 10,000 enemy ships came to teach humanity its place. They would learn instead. The collective armada emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. 10,000 ships spread across the darkness of space like a wall of metal and fire. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, representing the combined power of 100 species and 1,000 worlds. Fleet. Master Droll had been given command of the operation. It was his chance to restore his reputation after the disasters of the past months. He stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Eternal Judgment, and looked at the tactical display with satisfaction. "There," he said, pointing at the small cluster of human ships waiting near the 4th planet. "That is all they have. 47 vessels against our 10,000. They are brave, I admit, but bravery is not enough." His officers nodded in agreement. The numbers were overwhelming. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. "All ships advance," Droll ordered. "Standard formation. We will crush them and then destroy their homeworld. Let this be the end of the human problem." The armada began to move, a tide of destruction flowing toward the tiny human fleet. On the bridge of the Iron Will, Captain Yuna watched them come. Her crew was silent, every face grim with understanding. They knew what they were facing. They knew the odds. But not one of them asked to leave. Not one of them showed fear. Admiral Tae-Woo's voice came through the communication system. Transmitted to every human ship. "Remember your training. Remember your purpose. Remember everyone we lost on Mars, Today we fight for them. Today we show the galaxy that humanity will not be erased. Lieutenant Yeho finished his final calculations. The timing had to be perfect. Everything depended on the enemy doing exactly what they expected them to do. They are taking the bait, he reported. Standard formation, just as we predicted. They are treating this like a parade, not a battle. Mina nodded. Arrogance will be their downfall. All ships, prepare for Prometheus maneuver on my command. The collective armada closed the distance. Drawl allowed himself a smile as the human ships grew larger on his screens. They were not retreating. They were not begging for mercy. They simply waited like animals frozen in fear. Open fire when in range, he ordered. Destroy them all. The first wave of collective ships reached weapons range. Thousands of cannons charged, ready to unleash destruction, and then the human fleet vanished. Drawl blinked. One moment the enemy was there. The next moment, empty space. His sensors showed nothing. No engine trails, no jump signatures, nothing. Where did they go? He demanded. Find them. The answer came 2 seconds later when the Iron Will materialized directly in front of his flagship, so close that Drawl could see the human vessel through his viewport. At that range, shields were useless. Captain Yuna fired everything she had, the Eternal Judgment. Shuddered as weapons tore through its hull. On the bridge, Drawl was thrown from his seat as explosions ripped through the ship. Warning alarms screamed. Crew members died at their stations, but the Iron Will was already gone, folding away to strike another target. Across the armada, chaos erupted. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, imperializing inside shield perimeters, firing point blank, and vanishing before anyone could respond. The collective ships were designed for long-range battle, for organized combat where size and numbers mattered. They had no defense against enemies that could appear anywhere, anytime. Worse, the human ships moved so fast and so unpredictably that collective vessels began firing on each other. Targeting systems locked onto the last known position of human ships, only to find friendly vessels there instead. In the confusion, dozens of collective ships destroyed each other. Lieutenant Yeho coordinated the attack from his station, tracking enemy movements and directing human ships to optimal strike points. His voice was calm and steady, even as the universe exploded around them. Alpha Group, target the left flank. Beta Group, hit their supply ships. Gamma Group, focus on the command vessels. Do not give them time to organize. The human fleet was fighting 10,000 ships with 47, and they were winning. On the surface of Mars, another battle raged. Sergeant Minho led his soldiers against collective occupation forces that had landed during the early days of the war. The enemy had fortified the ruins of New Busan, using the bones of the dead city as their stronghold. Minho found that appropriate. They would die in the place they had helped destroy. Human soldiers emerged from tunnels that had been dug in secret over 18 months of occupation. They attacked from below, from above, from angles the enemy had not known existed. They fought with weapons they had built from salvage and stolen technology. They fought with knives when their guns ran empty. They fought with their bare hands when their knives broke. The collective soldiers were confused. Their intelligence said there were only a few hundred human resistance fighters on Mars. They were facing thousands. The humans had hidden their true numbers, building an army in secret right under the enemy's nose. Minho cornered a collective officer in the ruins of what had once been a school. The alien was larger than him, stronger, better armed. It did not matter. Minho had stopped caring about survival months ago. He cared only about victory. "You killed my sister in this city," he said, advancing slowly. "She was a teacher. She'll never hurt anyone in her life. She was trying to help the children reach safety when your bombs fell." The officer raised his weapon. Minho was faster. When it was over, he stood among the ruins and looked up at the sky, where flashes of light showed the space battle continuing far above. "We are coming for all of you," he whispered. "Every single one." In space, the tide had turned completely. 6,000 collective ships were destroyed or disabled. Fleetmaster Drawl was dead, his flagship torn apart by repeated human attacks. The survivors were fleeing in all directions, abandoning formation, abandoning orders, thinking only of escape. Admiral Taewoo watched the retreat from his command ship. His face showed no joy. Too many had died for joy. But there was satisfaction in knowing that the message had been received. He opened a communication channel that would be heard by every fleeing ship. "Tell your masters," he said. "Tell your leaders. Tell your children, you came for us. Now we come for you, and we do not stop. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Run as far as you can. It will not be far enough." The Battle of Crimson Void, named for the color of the nebula where it took place, was over. It was the worst military defeat in collective history. 10,000 ships had come to destroy humanity. Fewer than 4,000 escaped. When the news reached the Galactic Council, there was silence. High Arbiter Korath sat in his chambers and did not speak for hours. Counselor Nelva watched him from across the table, seeing the fear that he tried so hard to hide. "I warned you," she said quietly. "I told you not to underestimate them." Korath looked at her with empty eyes. "What do we do now?" "Now," Nelva said, "we prepare for them to come for us, because they will. After what we did to them, after everything, they will not stop until they have won, or until they are all dead. And after today, I do not think they can be killed." Across the galaxy, species that had joined the collective out of fear began to reconsider their loyalty. If the humans could do this, if they could defeat the greatest armada ever assembled, then perhaps the collective was not as powerful as they claimed. Perhaps there were other options. The first defections came within a week. More would follow. Humanity had struck a blow that would echo through history. But the war was not over yet. The hardest part was still to come. The war continued for 3 more years after the Battle of Crimson Void. 3 years of blood and fire, death across 1,000 worlds. The collective still had more ships than humanity. They still had more resources, more soldiers, more industrial capacity. By every logical calculation, they should have won. But logic had stopped mattering the moment humanity decided to fight. Admiral Taewoo pushed his forces forward without rest. Every victory opened new opportunities. Every captured system provided new resources. In every world they liberated swelled their ranks with species who had suffered under collective rule and now saw a chance for freedom. Counselor Nelva was the first major collective leader to defect. She brought the entire Volante fleet with her. 30 warships crewed by beings who had long disagreed with the Council's policies. Her people had been forced to join the collective centuries ago, conquered and subjugated until they forgot what freedom felt like. The humans reminded them. "We watched you fight," Nelva told Admiral Taewoo when they first met in person. "We watched you face impossible odds and refuse to surrender. We saw something we had lost in ourselves. Hope. Real hope, not the false contentment the Council offers." Other species followed. The Vorn broke their alliance with the collective after human ships protected one of their colony worlds from retaliation. The Cathiel, an ancient species that had remained neutral for millennia, began providing medical supplies and sanctuary for human wounded. Even some collective species began to question whether they were on the right side. The war was no longer humanity against the galaxy. It was freedom against tyranny. And freedom was winning. High Arbiter Korath watched his empire crumble, piece by piece. Every report brought worse news. Systems lost. Allies turning traitor. His own people beginning to whisper that perhaps he had made mistakes. He had never known failure before. He had ruled the Council for 200 years, guiding the collective with what he believed was wisdom and strength. Now that wisdom looked like arrogance, and that strength looked like cruelty. Warlord Brix, the one who had started everything by attacking Mars, died in the 2nd year of the war. His fleet was caught by human forces in a system he thought was safe. There were no survivors. Captain Yuna had led that mission personally. She reported the victory to Admiral Taewoo in simple words. "It is done." No celebration. No joy, just a task completed. Bricks had killed millions. Now he was dead. It did not bring those millions back, but it meant he would never kill again. The final year of the war was the hardest. The collective fought with the desperation of beings who saw their way of life ending. They used weapons they had forbidden to others. They bombed civilian populations. They committed acts that would haunt the galaxy for generations. Humanity matched them horror for horror, not by choice, but by necessity. When the enemy destroyed a human hospital ship, humans destroyed a collective medical station. When the enemy used chemical weapons on a human colony, humans responded with fire that burned for days. Dr. Sora watched the reports and felt her heart breaking. "This is not what we wanted," she said to Admiral Tae-woo. "We wanted to survive, not to become monsters." Tae-woo's face was tired. He had aged decades in the years of war. "We do what we must," he said. "When this is over, we can decide what kind of people we want to be. Right now, we can only be the people who survive." The end came faster than anyone expected. Human forces, supported by their growing alliance of former collective species, pushed into the core systems. World after world fell. The Council evacuated from one station to another, always staying one step ahead of the advancing human fleet. Finally, there was nowhere left to run. The human armada arrived at eternal accord. The station where Ambassador Hannah had once begged for equality, it was the heart of the collective, the symbol of galactic power. Now it was surrounded by human ships. Admiral Tae-woo did not send demands. He did not threaten or negotiate. He simply waited. Hi, Arbiter Korath surrendered within the hour. The peace treaty was signed in the Great Chamber where Hannah had been humiliated so many years before. This time, the positions were reversed. Human officers stood where collective leaders had once sat. Alien dignitaries who had laughed at humanity now sat in silence, waiting to learn their fate. Ambassador Hannah had survived the war. She had worked behind the lines, coordinating the political aspects of the conflict, building alliances, preparing for this moment. Now she sat at the head of the table, holding a document that would reshape the galaxy. "The terms are simple," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Full sovereignty for humanity. Reparations for the colony of New Busan and all other attacks on human populations. Dissolution of the provisional species classification. From this day forward, every species will have equal standing in galactic affairs. No more rulers, no more subjects. Only partners." Korath signed the treaty with shaking hands. He had thought humans were beneath him. He had thought they were animals with machines. He had been wrong about everything after the ceremony. Dr. Sora found Ambassador Hannah standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. "Do you think they have learned?" Sora asked. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. "They have learned to fear us. That is a start. The rest will come with time. And what about us? What have we learned?" Hannah turned to look at her old friend. "We have learned what we are capable of, the good and the bad. We have learned that we can fight when we must, and that we can win when others say we cannot. We have also learned that victory has a price, and that price is paid in pieces of our soul." She looked back at the stars. "Now we must learn how to build something better, how to make sure this never happens again. Not by being weak, but by being strong enough that no one dares to test us, and wise enough to use that strength carefully." Admiral Tae-woo retired after the war. He went home to a small house on Earth. Overlooking the Pacific Ocean, he spent his days watching the waves and trying to forget the things he had done and ordered others to do. Captain Yuna visited him once, years later. She found him sitting on his porch, looking older than his years. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Any of it?" He thought about the question for a long time. "I regret the necessity," he finally said. "I regret that they gave us no choice. But I do not regret fighting. I do not regret winning." He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "They thought we were weak because we wanted peace. They learned that wanting peace and being unable to fight are two very different things. We proved that to them. We proved it to the galaxy. And we proved it to ourselves. Yuna nodded. She understood. They all did. Everyone who had lived through those years. Humanity had asked for nothing but a place among the stars. They had been denied, attacked, and nearly destroyed. In response, it had risen up and changed the galaxy forever. The collective had wanted humanity to know its place. Now, as they did at the top. On Earth, in a rebuilt city on Mars, in colonies scattered across 100 worlds, humans looked up at the stars with new eyes. They were no longer afraid. They were no longer subjects waiting for permission. They were what they had always been deep in their hearts. Since the first human looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there, they were explorers, warriors, survivors. They were human, and the galaxy would never forget it.